The consultations and dialogues between government and critical stakeholders. Joining us via Zoom now is the former president of the Trade Union Congress, as well as the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria. Comrade Peter Esele, it's good to have you join us on TVC Breakfast Saturday. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Let's, begin with your take. So government, as well as private sector, and of course, crucial stakeholders, organized labor, have been in talks. How would you assess, the quality, the progress that have been made, so far, especially in the quest for a new befitting minimum wage for Nigerian workers?
Well, I think I would say what has been going on is that it's better that they are talking. There's a tripartite meeting going on. And what has been delaying is the sticking point of what is actually will be the new minimum wage. I think Labour has made their offer. Labour is asking for a little above 600,000. But we've not heard from the federal or state government, and also from the private sector employers. So, but the most important thing is that people are talking, and I also heard when you, in your opening statement, you made reference to the fact that Edo, Cross River, Lagos, Enugu, they've all also decided to increase worker salary. But the most important one is that those are not backed by law. The minimum wage expires every 5 years. So the previous one was 30,000 naira. It has expired. So what we're trying to have now is a new minimum wage. And whatever they come up with is my expectation that will be paid by both the federal and the state government.
Okay, Comrade Esele, you mentioned earlier about the over 600,000 naira that the living wage that Labour is asking for. But the question on the streets is that feasible?
You see, it's a negotiation. I can as well come to you now and say, I want 10 million naira as minimum wage. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like you also asking your employer in TVC and saying, okay, this is what you want to be paid. But at the end of the day, you and your employer will have to sit down and agree on what is doable, because both the employer and the employees' relationship is symbiotic. They need each other. None can do without the other. So they must find a midpoint that will ensure that, we're not going to have a galloping inflation. You can pay somebody 10 million naira as minimum wage, but at the end of the day, that 10 million naira can also not do as much. So what you have is a galloping inflation, or before we travel the route to Zimbabwe. So Labour can ask for whatever they want to ask for, and government can also say this is what we can afford. But at the end of the day, it has to be data driven, and then we also have to look at the revenue of the state, and then we also need to look at how would the employees survive in a very tough environment.
Okay, but do you think that despite the fact that the federal government and Labour are still having negotiations, and whatever they agree is binding on all states, do you think some states should pay a bit more than other states? Because going by the fact that we see a lot of states that we hear and we, from statistics, and see that a lot of states are not viable enough to pay that amount of minimum, even the 30,000 naira. For some other states complained about it at the time. So do you think some states should be able to or should pay higher than other states?
All states are viable to pay minimum wage. All. The reason why you hear state governors saying that they cannot pay minimum wage is because of the way they live. If you look at the cost of governance in Nigeria, it's very, very expensive. A governor comes in, and the next thing is having PA, SA. You have commissioners, and then the commissioners have retinue of aides. So you have SA to the SA. So we have series of wastages in our system, and corruption. Corruption is also one of our biggest bane. Why any state will say they cannot afford it. All states are viable to pay minimum wage. Now, what are we talking about? What's minimum wage? Minimum wage is the base. The minimum we think that anybody in Nigeria can live by. I'm not talking about living wage yet. So from that minimum that you now have to move to the next level, which you not talk about living wage. But what you need to ask yourself is that the minimum wage, where can it take you to? And that also now comes to government policies, and now they are able to absorb some of the challenges that the ordinary workers and ordinary Nigerians are facing. So first thing is very clear: all states can pay the minimum wage. All states is viable enough to pay workers. A laborer deserves his wage. And then when you also now come to the import of some states have not been able to pay, and that's where the organized labor also need to come in here, because most times our attention is on the federal government. All the commitments that I was former president of TUC, so I can judge the federal and the state government, because one thing is very clear: whatever commitment the federal government gets in with workers, federal government always meets it. It's always the state governors or the state government that are always found wanting. So organized labor should also now take the battle, take it to the state government, and also let them know that yes, this is what we think you can pay, and this is what you have to pay.
Right, we're seeing some wage adjustments as well as wage awards, not just at the federal level. Some states are also taking it upon themselves. But when you look at, the moves by the Tinubu administration, especially in the latest pay increase for certain workers on the consolidated salary structures, what impact do you think this will have on the ongoing consultations by the tripartite committee?
Now, from what you've just said, is wage adjustment, and then I also call it government intervention to also help the workers to go through these tough times before the tripartite will come up with a new minimum wage. So whatever is being done by both federal and state government is actually not backed by law. So if it's backed by law, it's only the national minimum wage that is actually backed by law. So whatever is agreed by the tripartite, I think the Enugu state governor was very clear. In his own adjustment that he made, he said, I want to put the governor, or let me paraphrase what he said, was that, okay, what I'm doing now is something that is temporary, just waiting for whatever the tripartite committee in Abuja agrees, and that he's also ready to implement it. So one thing government also need to do, and which of course is both organized labor and government, is that we also not only look at the cash aspect. There is the cash angle of things, and there should also be the other area of looking at what are the challenges we are facing right now. The major challenge is transportation, education, and once healthcare. How are we able to absorb those things? That's where government policy comes in. Because if you take away transportation from right now, workers spend as high as between 60 to 70% of their salary on transportation costs. You're also aware of the ongoing fuel scarcity. That too has also added more burden to the average Nigerian worker. It's for government to have what I call a holistic approach at the federal level, and then we also have what I would call the omnibus plan, which is between federal, state, and local government, whereby everybody sit down and say, okay, this is what we are taking off the ordinary Nigerian to make things easier for them. But once we don't have that, we'll continue to have what I call ad hoc measures, and ad hoc measures is not taking us anywhere.
Right. We've also, seen, some form of, demands by labor, though yet to be accepted, as talks are still ongoing. But then we understand that labor is, asking or demanding for a 2-year review, as against the 5-year that we see that has elapsed. They're also asking for automatic salary adjustment anytime there is increment or inflation exceeds 7.5%. What do you think?
Okay, what labor is trying to do now is to have what I'll call, they want to be data driven. They are giving baselines. So once you're having these various baselines, which of course is also a welcome development for them to bring before the federal government. But as I said earlier, it's a negotiation. You can make all manner of demands, but we have to come to the table and look at what is workable, what is doable. And it's also very important for both the federal and state government to make sure that labor is not weakened. Because each time you go into a meeting with both federal and state government, and both labor leaders come out of that meeting and they are talking and there are no substance to what they are saying, Nigerians will start asking questions. Even the rank and file will start asking questions. And they start losing faith in the leadership. Not through fault of theirs, but it's also dangerous for the federal government or the state government to go ahead to weaken the leadership of both NSC and TUC, which of course sometimes I see by commission or mission is what they are doing right now.
Well, NGF, the Governors Forum, has also said that they will abide by whatever the tripartite committee agrees upon in terms of a new minimum wage, a realistic minimum wage. But then we are seeing some states saying even after an agreement has been reached, they will still need to constitute their own committees to work out the modalities for the minimum wage implementation, at least the new one. But don't you think this will draw us back? As in, will there be need for these states to have to draw up another committee to work out the modality, or is there really merit in this move?
I think what you are having is the highest form among the governors also have to do with the Nigerian Governors Forum. If the forum agrees that this is the direction they are going to take, other governors will also fall in line. So I'm not disturbed or worried by what they say. You see, in a negotiation, what you have is that everybody is trying to take position. Organized labor is trying to take position. Federal government is trying to take position. State governments are trying to take position. Let us also give it to those in the organized private sector. I will tell you there are those in the organized private sectors that have moved ahead long ago, even with the fact that you have subsidy removal, naira floats. So all of these challenges, there are some in the private sector that have moved far ahead of what we are talking about now, who are alive to their responsibility. It's just a typical government with bureaucratic bottleneck and slow pace of governance that is affecting what is going on. But whatever is agreed at the end of the day, I think it will be backdated. And if federal government thinks that whatever award they have given and they want to go back and calculate it, they go ahead and calculate it and deduct the same amount. But I don't think federal government is giving all of this pro bono, no.
Okay, so if you were to, we're just having a discussion, but in your own view, if you want to suggest a minimum wage for the government, looking at the economic variables and everything going on at this point, what do you think should be the appropriate amount for a worker at the minimum wage?
I don't think I will want to walk that path of suggesting the new minimum wage, because part of me is with the comrades too. So let me allow the comrades to do their negotiation, because once I make a comment here now on what I think should be the minimum wage, that may not be reference for both sides, and which I don't want to do. I want both sides to have judgment and come to their own minimum wage.
But do you think whatever they come up with will be appropriate for the Nigerian worker, looking at the fact that whatever comes up now is binding till after 5 years?
Well, I will also leave that to those who are doing the negotiations to say